Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this pop-up parade card. It's pretty reminiscent of the 2 column cards I've made recently, but it's just on the card front. It does slough to one side to fold flat to go in an envelope, and then the pieces just stand up, so it's got a nice 3D element to it, but it's not really strong enough to stand itself up, which is why it is a whole card. So without further delay, I will bring in the ingredients and I will show you how we made it. It's using a piece of basic white, and it's 8.5 by 5.5 scored at 4 1/4. That is the standard A2 size card. There is a piece of soft seafoam, and this is 5.5 by 2 3/4. Almost forgot myself there. And then these are the pieces that make the pop-ups. So they're each 5 inches wide, and they're scored at 1/2 inch on each end. So they are 3/4 of an inch, and then the one in the middle is 3 inches. But again, it's 5 by 3 and it's scored at 1/2 inch on each side. I cut a banner out of another piece of a scrap of basic white that I had, using the die from the Stylish Shapes, and then it uses a piece of the wonderful Florals in Bloom designer series paper, and this is it. And I will tell you about that when we get to the point that we're popping those on. So there's actually only one bit of stamping, so I might as well go ahead and get that done. I'm going to use the Pretty Peacock ink because it coordinates with the colors in the designer series paper. And the stamp I've chosen to use is from a paper pumpkin kit from December 23, and it just says hello friend. So let me see if I can get this on here without my head joining in the shot. I recently did a Creativity Now event for demonstrators, and Sarah Douglas, the CEO of Stampin' Up, challenged everyone to make cards to send to people. She's actually said 3 a week. Whether you can do 3 a week or not, I just think it's lovely because it was with a view to combating loneliness. If you send a card to somebody, or give a card to somebody, or stick one through their mailbox, it just gives them that sense that they're not alone and they're always remembered. But anyway, so lots of times I will use a sentiment that I like. Hello friend. I mean, it speaks for itself, doesn't it? So it then means that all the cards that I make, or at least the samples that I make, I can send them out into the world to do good. So let's get started with this lovely card. So I'm going to attach the piece of soft seafoam to the middle of this piece of basic white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use liquid glue, because when something is embossed, like this piece is, if you do it with your rolling adhesive, sometimes you risk, just got glue up the back of my hand. Oof, that wasn't very good. You risk pushing the embossed image out. So I like to use liquid glue, because who doesn't like having sticky hands to do a video with? So I'm just going to place it in the middle. And okay, it might not be exact, but it's as close as I can get it to be. If you wanted to, you could of course measure it, but I'm pretty sure that that is as centered as it can be. And just for the record, the embossing folder that I used was Festive Textured Dimensions. You don't even have to emboss it. You don't even have to put a piece in the middle of there. I just felt it was a little bit of something, and it added, picked out some of the lighter tones of green, and so I chose to put it on my card. So now what we're going to do is we are going to attach the white pieces. Now this should end up being 5/8. Let me just check, just out of curiosity. So, well, that's 3/4 and that's 3/4. Oh yes, because it's a little bit smaller than the pieces that were going on. So the 1/2 inch, the piece that's strip that's going to go down the side, is also a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put it on shy of the edge. You'll see what I mean by that. I'm such a visual learner myself. Sometimes I know what I mean, but trying to describe what I mean, whew. So I'm going to pop this little 1/2 inch strip just shy of the edge. So it's more or less 3/8 wide. And then I want to close that down and pop this one on, and it should be just a little bit shy. Now you can put the whole thing to the edge, but then, like I say, the designer series paper only goes so far, and I like to cut it short, so when I put the designer series paper on, you don't see the little piece sticking out the side. So that's the bottom. No, that's the top. Goodness me. Top, bottom, schmottom. So we will now put the bottom on, and again I'll use the same principle. I'm going to put it just a little 1/8 shy of the edge, fold it like it would be closed, and then put it onto the other side. Now it could be that you have to give it a little press backwards and forwards. It's more important that it folds flat to go in the envelope for mailing. You don't want it to buckle and bevel when you put it into the envelope. So just give it, sometimes it'll only go one way, and that's fine as long as they all only go one way. And now we're just going to pop adhesive down this strip. And the reason I'm putting adhesive the whole way down is because it's going to move a little bit, and it's always best to give it as much of a chance as you possibly can. So what we need to do now is sort of, again, eyeball, or you could measure. It's about 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to eyeball that into place. So we've got an even display of the designer series paper behind. Make sure that they go evenly, and that then is the body of the card all ready to be decorated. So the pieces, the overall piece is 3 3/4 by 5 1/2, and I cut a 1/2 inch strip off each side. So I'm now going to just pop those 1/2 inch strips into place. And the reason I cut them off each side was so that you get the continuity of the designer series paper as it flows across the card. And now you can see why I cut that just a little bit short. You can't see where this peeks out. And then I'll move those out of the way, and then I'm going to pop this on the other side. And there we have it all nicely on. Now these pieces I was able to go ahead already and cut those, and because this is 3/4 inch, I cut these at 5 eighths of an inch. So I cut 5 eighths off the top, 5 eighths off the bottom, and it still allows the pattern to flow. But then we have to do some extra cutting for the middle piece, and you'll see why, because if you just cut them straight out, it's going to throw the pattern off a little bit. So we'll pop that onto its area at the top. And if, you know, you don't have to try and do it while it's in midair. You can lean it off to one side. Now what we try to do is, there is the 1/2 inch gap in between these, and then the little slither, the little 1/8. So I'm going to bring in the paper trimmer and trim off 3/8. Let me have a look. Measure it up. So it wants to go, if here is where it belongs, and we're trying to get it to this point, 5/8. So we're going to cut 5/8 of an inch off the top. And then, because we know mathematically, because we know this is a 3 inch square, and this square wants to be 2 1/4, we've cut the top off. Now we can just cut this to 2 3/4, and it should mat onto the square, and the pattern follows over. I know that sounds awfully complicated, but if you didn't, your pattern would be adrift and the tops would match beautifully and then the middle wouldn't. So you cut 5/8 off the top, and then you cut 2 3/4 because that's the size of the square, and then whatever you have left, this piece missing out the bottom, is basically what it is. That's a nice succinct answer. It's like, you know, when your kids say, why can't I do that? It's like, because I said so. It's just because mathematically that's what you're left with. So now this is a 3-inch square, so we are going to pop our 2 3/4-inch square into place, and then I'm just going to bring in a couple of dimensionals to pop on the back of the greeting that we stamped earlier, and pop that. Ooh, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if I want to really cover those flowers, but I think I'd rather cover them at the bottom than at the top. So we'll pop that on as long as it fits nicely. You can move your greeting around. Sometimes it just depends where in the designer series paper the pieces come out of. And then last but not least, I'm going to use these wonderful shades of green hexagons, which just came out in the catalogue when it was released. And I'm just going to pop a few on. So I will pop one up here. I'll pop a green one over there. And then let's see if we can just choose one to go down here. I don't want them to really be in a stripe. I want them to sort of be every which way. But there you have it. 2 cards the same. Pop-up parade card. It does have an inside, like I say, rather than be freestanding. If you like what you've seen, please consider subscribing. Ring the bell so you don't miss out. If you've got a question or a comment, pop those in the box below and I will always get back with you. And in the meantime, thanks for watching.